Hey there, my fellow designers and creatives. Hope you're all doing well. This is Chetan here from Design Palette, and this is part 3 of my series on the basics of information architecture and typography in UI design. If you have not seen the first 2 parts, I highly recommend checking it out. Links will be in the description. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually remove this rounding that we have. Alright, because corners should never be rounded. And there's supposed to be a status bar at top, which is not there, but that's okay. That should be fine. Alright, and we've got this bar over here. That's fine. Okay, now let me go and get the typography scale that I had. Alright, let me just bring that over here. So this time I'm strictly going to keep the body 16 because we have a lot of content. Okay, and we have some kind of font called Nanito, which is totally fine. Now, one thing you want to understand here is try to understand what the screen is about. So basically, there are 3 steps that are there, and you have to complete each of those steps to move forward into the app. Okay, so the first one is, let's say you completed the first step. Okay, in this case, the user has completed the first step and he has to complete the next 2 steps. Okay, so let's start off with the top part. Okay, so we have this huge icon, which I think is, taking up a lot of attention, but let's say the user wants to keep it so huge, it's totally fine. And also make sure that, these are never in decimals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it to 64 because that's a good multiple. Or I think even a 48 is a good number, which is fine. And I'm just going to reduce this to 48 by 48. Cool. And then we have awesome. So let me just remove that spacing. We need it to be, one beside the other. Okay, and this is actually 24. Now, as I said, we also can add another one, which is titles, which is 18 plus. 18 plus. Okay, let me just check if that's what I mentioned before. Make sure I don't confuse you guys. Yeah, so 18 plus. Cool. So in this case, it's 24, which is totally fine. I'm totally okay with it because it's a celebratory, information that it's saying awesome. Now, I'm not going to talk into the UX about this because if I do, I can find a lot of mistakes, but let's just say this is only for the purpose of design. All right. And we've got, let's put that over here. Okay. We can kind of align this to the top and make sure that this is somewhat like, 4 pixels from the top. Fine. Okay, and also we want this icon and everything to be 16 pixels to the left, so let's move that to 16. Okay, next one. Now this is 12. Now if you look at this, we're jumping from 24 to 12. All right, and that's a massive jump. Now I think the best I would go is for 14 or 16 because that is a few font sizes down. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this to 16 and see how that looks. And the other thing is that we have this letter spacing. I'm just going to reduce that to 0 because it makes it look weird. So that's pretty much. And I'm just going to double click on this corner so that it puts everything into one line and we can, neatly go ahead and space these things out. All right. Maybe I'm just going to bring it 2 pixels to the bottom. Okay. And then we can move this over to the left and make sure that this is also 16 pixels to the left side. So go ahead and complete the other 2 steps, which is fine. Let's see how it looks when we set it to 14. I think 16 looks, I think 14 should be okay in this particular instance. I think that should be fine. All right. The other thing is we have this kind of a light blue color, which I would say is okay. It's a personal choice, but let's see. But I feel like making this to be, but I feel like setting this to white. Yeah, I think let's keep it that color. It's a personal preference, maybe a brand color. So I'm just going to leave it. So let me just group these 2. Okay, cool. So now personally, I feel that this is really not needed, this kind of a modal. One reason is because it has this weird gradient and the text is almost not visible. So personally, I would go ahead and remove this. All right. And now nothing is visible. So I'm just going to select all the 3 texts and let me just change the color of this to black for now. And we can see how we can make this look better. Okay. So we've got a couple of things over here. So we have personal details. Okay. Now it looks like the text has been meddled with because, it looks like something is off. So I'm just going to increase this and double click so it kind of fits the text perfectly, which considers the line height as well. So just move that down and I can see a typo. So let's fix that. Cool. So we have personal details, qualification, experience. Now this is 18 pixels, which is fine. All right. Now, because the topmost title is 24, and this is our secondary information. If you look at this screen, so I'm going to kind of make this 16. I would say 16 is good. All right. And we also have this another information, which is 12 pixels. Let me just fix this one as well. Okay. Now, in this case, I'm going to talk a little bit about the UX as well. So let's say that this state, so somebody has filled up the personal details. I think rather than showing 8 out of 8 answered, it really does not matter how many questions the person answered. It would be best to give a success state. So we can say something like completed. And that is much more, user friendly. And we can also go ahead and, change the color of this and give it like a dark color to show completed. Now here he is using 12, which I think is okay. But if we bump this up to 14, might be too much. So I think 12 is decent because it's kind of like a tertiary information. Personal details is the main thing. And even though completed is kind of secondary, I think it suits a tertiary hierarchy level. Anyway, I think this is extra bold, which I think is too much. Maybe we could reduce that to semi-bold. All right. And let me just ungroup this. Okay. And we could reduce this to like 4 pixels or maybe even 2 pixels to bring it a little bit closer. Let's ungroup these and let's bring these two also closer. So I'm going to reduce this to 4 and I'm going to reduce this to 4 as well. Okay. Now the secondary text has an opacity of 80 with a color text, with the color black. Usually if it's a secondary text, you would always want to make it 60 and below. So I'm going to reduce that down even further. And obviously this has to be questions because it's 7 questions. Okay, great. Now we have these lines that were there. I'm going to use a different style. So I'm going to delete this. Okay. And the next thing is these icons. Now these icons are so huge that they're taking up a lot of attention from the text. And this is really not that important because first of all, I'm already saying completed. So there's really no necessity to have this icon so huge. So what we could do is I'm going to reduce the size of this to say 32 or maybe even 24 to keep it really small because we don't really need it to be that huge. And I'm going to put a card over here. So I'm just going to lay this out first. And obviously we want this to be like a green color. So let's get like a nice green color. And obviously we want the inner icon to be white color, right? And I think that looks much neater. All right, pretty good. What we can do is let's create some sort of a rectangle. All right, and we want to make sure that is 16 pixels from either side. So, and then we can move this to the back. All right, and he's actually used a rectangle as a background. So I'm going to delete that, and rather I'm going to add it to the frame itself. All right, great. Okay, so now let's kind of maybe add a small rounding of 4 pixels. That's fine. And what we can do is let's just place this slowly inside and kind of make it maybe 12 pixels from the left and 12 pixels from the top. Not really sure. I think 16 is a good number. We can set it to 16. And let's bring this down here as well. And we could make this 16 as well. Okay, we want to play around with the icon and move that in the center. So we can center that and we can make this 16 pixels. Cool. Now this color obviously needs to be changed. So what we would want to do is a couple of options. Since maybe this is the primary brand color, what we can do is we can pick this same color that we have. And that looks completely fine. But the problem is it looks quite weird with this green text. So one thing we could do is maybe make this completely white. But that also quite doesn't look really well. I think what's happening is this background color is throwing me off. So I'm going to set that to white. I'm going to set this also to white. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in a shadow. So I'm going to add in an effect. And here, one thing you would, okay, so here I'm going to talk a bit about shadows. So one of the practices that I use is the blur value is always 1.5 or 2 times the size of the X value. So let's say I set the Y value to 10. I'm pretty much going to set the blur value to 20. Okay. And also I'm going to reduce the opacity quite a bit. You always want to keep it somewhere in the range of 8 to 20. So I'm going to keep it to like 16. In this case, I'm going to keep it to 20. All right. That's good. So I'm just going to group this and move this a bit up. All right. And make sure that we have a decent amount of spacing of 32, which is good. Okay. And so ideally what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take these two and move this outside, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to make so we can have it to be 24 pixels. All right. Or I think 16 or 20, kind of depends. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this qualification. I think the drop shadow is quite a bit too much, so I'm going to reduce that to 6 and 12. And also maybe reduce the opacity to like 8. Let's keep it to 12, should be okay. Let's do the same thing over here. This is going to be, I'm sorry, I kind of forgot what that was. 8, 6, okay. So 12 and 6 and 12, fine, cool. Now this is not a completed state. This is something that the person has to complete, the user has to complete. So here I'm going to just say 7 questions. Okay. Now another thing is, in terms of UX, is I'm really not sure if questions really matter to the user. So what we can do is we can call this step 1, and we can give this maybe not like a nice brand color, which is this one. All right. And I think this has to be 100% and quite a bit dark. All right. So I'm just going to kind of make it like this. Looks much better. Okay. Copy that. And this is going to be step 2. Okay. Maybe add this brand color here as well. Kind of looks like a link, but should be okay. Not really that big of a deal. Okay. And this is obviously not completed. So this is a state that the user has to complete. So instead of making shadows, what we can do is an option is to remove the shadows and add a stroke. Okay. And what we can do is again set the opacity to 12. So kind of looks like this. All right. And what we can do is we can grab this icon. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come over here and delete this icon that we have, and I'm going to paste this one. And we want to reduce this down drastically. As you can see, it's in decimals. We do not want it to be in decimal ever. Let's set it to like 12. Maybe 12 is too much. Let's set the height to 12. Yeah. And 8 or 7. Yeah, cool. Okay. That looks okay. And I think I'm going to make this to be black color and an opacity of 60, because I don't think we need to use this color. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to apply that color to this. Okay. And for this circle, I'm going to reduce this, and or we can just keep it like this. Or another thing that we can do is we can add in a slight fill. All right. And for this fill, we can add that slight color that we used, which looks good. But our practice that I follow is I apply the same color of the main accent color and reduce the opacity of that to 10%. Okay, so that's kind of a neat trick that I use. And we can actually make this same as this. So I'm going to reduce this to black and change the opacity of this to like 60. Okay, cool. And I'm going to, we have that. So I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to bring that down so that it's 24. And, this is step 3. And we can call this experience. Looking good. All right. Now we might want to make this a bit bigger. So because, there's a lot of space that's being wasted. So one thing we could do is, let's say that we select these two, and rather than giving it 16, we can make this 24 pixels and make these like really big cards. All right. I think 24 is a good, and let's see the height of this. So this is around 90 pixels. So let's do the same thing for these two. Let's make it 90 pixels. And we could kind of group these two and center the content. And, we could select these two, Control G, and we could center the content again. And then maybe we could space it out 32. Maybe 32 is too much. So I'm going to set like 24, and 24. Still a bit of space wasted over here, but I think what we can do is like just bring this a bit down. All right, we'll have to play around with it a little bit, but I mean, ideally you could see that this looks significantly better than this. Maybe even if we added this color, let's see how that would look. So I'm going to copy that and paste that. Looks a little weird because of this white color, but I think I would stick to something that's white. And another thing that we could do is obviously have a button. All right, so here is a cool tip in Figma, which is called auto layout. So if I type in next, okay, and this is kind of supposed to be a primary action, and so the text has to be quite big. So I'm going to bump this to 16 because this is our primary text. Okay, and I'm going to press Shift A on my keyboard, which is going to create this auto layout kind of a thing. And what I'm going to do is, and since this is our primary color, I'm going to copy that, and here I'm going to go to the fill of that button, and I'm going to add that. Oh, let me just paste that. And we're going to kind of, make this quite big. So I'm going to go ahead and just increase this. All right. And we could give it a rounding of 8 or maybe even 4. Okay. And we can make this even bold if we want, or we could go for extra bold. And I'm going to make this white because white looks better. And we could move it over to the left side, make sure it's 16 pixels, and you want to increase this so it kind of matches the end. All right, that looks good. And we can make this into a disabled state. So until the user finishes all 3, you won't be able to see it. So if you quickly take a look and see how this looks after it's finished, we could set this to 0. And maybe what we can do is you can right click and choose copy properties, which is Ctrl-Alt-C. And I'm going to press Ctrl-Alt-V and Ctrl-Alt-V to paste. So this is how it would look after it's completed. Obviously the tick marks have to be there, but assuming the tick marks are there, and you can just click on next. So I think there's a significant amount of difference between the first 2. So that's pretty much it for end of this series, guys. This is our 3 parts. If you haven't seen the other 2 parts, definitely do check that out. If you have any questions or requests, let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. And I'll see you guys in my next video. So till then, take care and bye-bye.